Hey everybody, it's Eric from epautos.com, your libertarian car guy. Wanted to do a little rant this morning about an article that I caught, or rather an announcement that was made by Jaguar, head stylist Ian Callum, that they anticipate the entire Jaguar product portfolio being electric car only within about 6 years. And that just started my day on a really gloomy note to think about that. If they become electrified, what is the difference really between an electric Jaguar, an electric Porsche, or an electric Chevy? They're basically just skin jobs at that point. They're shells, interchangeable shells really, over the same common type of drivetrain. There's not much that you can really do to make an electric motor any different than any other electric motor. A motor's a motor, a battery's a battery. I remember when I was a kid, I used to play with little model race car sets, and it was kind of like that. The cars had different bodies, but if you took the bodies off, underneath there was the same running gear, the same guts, and that's fine for a kid's toy. As far as for a car, particularly a car where there's a lot of emotional investment and personality tied up in the mechanicals of the car, I don't see it, or at least, maybe I'm just a getting old stick in the mud, and it doesn't appeal to me at all, because as far as I'm concerned, it's just a shell. I think it's very analogous to the difference between, let's say, a Samsung phone and an iPhone. Oh boy, one has a slightly different array of apps, but they pretty much are the same thing. They work the same way. There really isn't that much functional or tactile difference between an iPhone and a Samsung or a Galaxy or whatever it is you've got. And I think that's where we're headed with these electric cars. They're all going to be essentially mobile cell phones. And in that case, I think you kind of lose much justification or reason for high-end brands like Jaguar and Porsche, distinctive brands, because after all, why bother? You can get a loaded-up Chevy that has all the same apps, that has the same kind of electric motor, that has the same kind of battery. Okay, maybe the Jaguar has a more powerful battery, a fancier battery, but it's the same thing, really. And at some point, they're all going to become literally the same, just like most electronics. If you get into a lower-end car today, a lower-end car, meaning an entry-level car around $17,000-$18,000, it's going to have a touch screen, it's going to have power windows, it's going to have even a digital dashboard. It's going to have all the things that 7 or 8 years ago you only found in the very high-end cars. Now pretty much all cars, there's this homogenizing going on, have pretty much the same types of electronics and gadgets in them. And they're having to, the higher end cars are having to really reach to come up with things to differentiate themselves from the lower end cars. So you find things like, massaging seats or a bigger touchscreen, and some of these other more elaborate electronic systems in some of the higher end cars. But even that is going to filter down, and we're going to get to the point, I think, where these cars are all just sort of modules, homogeneous modules, and I can't see a case for spending twice as much or 3 times as much on, say, Module C versus Module A. And I think these luxury car brands are really foolish in terms of their own survival to buy into all this electric car stuff. And that leaves aside all of the economic and functional problems with electric cars, which those of you who've listened to me rant about this before, or caught me on the radio, or read my articles, you already know all about that, so I'm not going to talk about that again in this video. I'm just going to confine myself to talking about the loss of distinctiveness. You're going to end up with cars that really their only differences are, okay, this one is shaped differently, it's got a different badge on it, but fundamentally it's all the same thing. And if you go back a few years, when they did that with the mechanicals of cars, for example, General Motors, when General Motors got rid of its independent engineering divisions, meaning that it used to be the case that if you bought a Pontiac, let's say, it actually had a Pontiac designed and built engine in it. It didn't have a Chevy engine in it, and a Buick didn't have a Chevy engine in it. Well, what GM did was consolidate its engine manufacturing into one, what they called corporate engine facility, and they put corporate engines in all their vehicles. And after they did that, the formerly independent brands like Pontiac lost any real reason, and Oldsmobile lost any real reason for existing, because they just become marketing arms for generic GM products that were styled to look a little different and were priced a little bit differently. And I think the same kind of thing is going to happen with these electric cars. They're all going to become more or less the same, and when they're more or less the same, why would anybody in their right mind want to pay a significant premium for one versus another? I can see paying slightly more for one versus another, but when you're talking about cars like Jaguars, Porsches, BMWs, Mercedes, these are cars that cost 2, 3, and sometimes 4 times as much as an average car, and you really have to come up with a good reason to get people to pay that kind of money. Maybe the status will be enough. Maybe people are shallow enough that simply being able to drive around in a homogeneous module that has a Jaguar Leaper on the hood or a Mercedes Star on its hood, even though everything under the hood is virtually the same as what you'd find in some other less expensive module, maybe they'll do that. I have no idea. I hope not. I find the whole thing pretty depressing. And perhaps you do too. Anyway, that's the end of the rant for today. Post your comments either here on the YouTube thing or come on down to epautos.com and you can actually post it the old-fashioned way with your keyboard. And thanks for viewing, and we'll catch up with you again soon.